Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host and head witch, Miss Solaris BlueRaven at the helm this evening. You've just listened to my new customized bumper intro for the show here at the station. A special thank you to Vaux St. Clair of the incredible goth rock band Angels of Liberty out of the UK who created my new bumper. If you enjoy goth rock music, please check out their website. It's angelsofliberty.com. And the members of that band are Vaux St. Clair, Scarlet Powers, and Echo Von Hammer. And I want to give a shout out to everybody at Revolution Radio, staff, producers, listeners, chat room, and thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We are 100% listener supported, so if you like what you're hearing, please click on the donate button. We appreciate your support, and thank you for any contribution you can make to this excellent station. A heads up for anyone interested in purchasing my documentary DVD called Eye of the Remote, A Disclosure of Covert Technology. I am cleaning out my inventory and have my DVD on sale for half off on Amazon.com, so if you're interested in my DVD now, would be a good time for you to pick up a copy. The sale will be on for about a month, January only. Okay, we are listening to Studio A. My special guest this evening is Rob Sullivan. The only child of antique dealers, he was born on October 30th, 1971 in Baltimore, Maryland. He graduated high school from Friends School of Baltimore, the oldest private school in Baltimore, founded in 1784 in June of 1990. He attended Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania, becoming a brother of Lambda Chi Alpha, Theta Pi, or 1199 fraternity. He earned his BA in history in 1995. Mr. Sullivan spent his entire junior year of college, 1992-1993, abroad at St. Catherine's College, Oxford University, England, studying European history and philosophy. While in Oxford, Mr. Sullivan was a member of the Oxford Union, the Oxford University Conservative Association, and the Oxford Law Society. Upon returning to the United States in June of 1993, he took a year off from Gettysburg College to serve as the office director of the Washington International Studies Council, located on Capitol Hill. Prior to attending law school in the United States, he spent the Michaelmas term 1995 at Trinity College, Oxford University, studying jurisprudence and international law. From 1997 to 2000, he attended Widener University School of Law, Delaware campus, from where he received his Juris Doctorate. Admitted to the State Bar of Maryland in 2000, as well as the District of Columbia in 2002, Mr. Sullivan spent 2001 to 2008 working at various law firms in the Baltimore area, practicing primarily in the area of insurance defense. Mr. Sullivan is a Freemason, having joined Amicable St. John's Lodge number 25 in Baltimore, Maryland, 1997. He became a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason in 1999, Valley of Baltimore, Orient of Maryland. The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism, is his first published work and is the result of 20 years of research. A lifelong Marylander, he resides in Baltimore. His website is robertsullivan4th.wordpress.com. Please welcome Rob to the show this evening, and thank you for being on the show tonight. Rob, how you doing?
Oh, thank you, Solaris. I'm doing great. It's great to be here with you on the Witching Hour tonight. Great introduction, of course, and yeah, glad to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. It's quite an honor to have you here, so thank you again for joining us. And I'd like you to tell the listeners, first of all, what projects you're currently working on, and also let's talk about your book, The Royal Arch of Enoch, and what guided you to write this book, and can you provide our listeners with a synopsis of the book and where they can purchase a copy? I want to make sure they have all that data.
Sure. Well, I'll answer the second part first and the first part second.
Okay.
The Royal Arch of Enoch began for me, as you read off in the introduction, while I was at Oxford University in 1992-93. I never matriculated at Oxford. I was an associate student. My alma mater, of course, as you mentioned, was Gettysburg College. But I was over there for the entire, this would have been my junior year at Gettysburg. When I was over there, I was studying history, philosophy, even theology. And it was really while I was over there that I sort of was introduced to this concept of what you would call the Hermetic tradition and its influence and impact on material culture, on a political level, on a social level, and on an economic level, and even on a religious level, and, how it was, even on another extent, even like architecture, how, buildings were incorporated elements of mysticism, things like that, buildings of importance. I was introduced to works by people like Frances Yates. She wrote extensively about this. There was a book that I was introduced to over there, a book called The Art and Architecture of Freemasonry by an English professor named James Stephen Curl. And this work really just left a deep impression on me. It wasn't until 1997 that I became a Mason. I wasn't a Mason, of course, when I was at Oxford. And I was just doing research. I was reading people like Manly Palmer Hall, Albert Pike, Albert Mackey, and just researching Masonry, researching the symbols, of course, joining the Masonic Lodge in 1997 and joining the Scottish Rite in 1999, of course, helped. Actually being able to see the rituals, both participating in them and then watching them as a member of the lodge. And I was just doing research into Masonry, and it really wasn't until the advent of the internet, until the late 1990s, early 2000s, where a lot of this information became much more readily accessible. And it wasn't with the social media until around the mid-2000s that I created this MySpace page. It doesn't exist anymore. But I was just posting, blogs, photo galleries about the research I was doing, and it really took off. And of course, I was planning, writing more extensively about this, and I was approached by another Freemason who was a friend of mine. He had seen the MySpace page. He said, look, this is all good and fine what you're doing, but, rather than doing that, why don't you commit yourself to a book? And, kind of like you see in a cartoon, the light bulb went off over top of my head, and I really just started, organizing, really committing myself to writing the book. And, I completed it in 2011. It was completed. It was published in 2012, late 2012, and the book documents the Royal Arch of Enoch, the impact of Masonic ritual, philosophy, and symbolism. Documents this previously undiscovered historical anomaly going on. In a nutshell, that the Masonic higher degree ritual system that's being developed in France in the 1740s, 1750s is incorporating elements and components and symbolic interpretations, and even within Masonry's underlying philosophy of the Book of Enoch, which is a text left out of the Bible. It's an apocryphal Jewish text that dates to around the Second Temple period. We're talking, 300 BCE. It disappears from Western civilization at around 2-3 Common Era or AD, and it's off the history pages up until 1773 or thereabouts, when a Freemason named James Bruce returns from Ethiopia with copies of the book. And even then, it's just deposited in the basement of the Bodleian Library at Oxford University, where it remains untranslated into English until 1821. But and when this ritual is being developed in the 1730s, 1740s, 1750s, the limitation of non-Masonic knowledge about Enoch was limited to Genesis 18 through Genesis 5:18 to 24 and Jude 14:15. That's it. There are no other source material out there that documents the stuff that these Masonic ritualists are talking about. And this is not only that you'll see in the ritual, but its underlying philosophies, its symbolic lessons, things like that. And the book is 700 pages long, and what I get into is the anomaly, but then I get into the impact of this particular ritual, which is really one of the premier ones in Masonry. It documents the recovery of what's called the Tetragrammaton, which is the name of God, and this ties into Blue Lodge Freemasonry, which is degrees 1, 2, and 3, which is lost in the Blue Lodge, but is recovered in this higher degree ceremonial. And like I said, the book documents this anomaly. What I'm working on now, and the book, if you want to purchase it, the Royal Arch of Enoch can be purchased. If you go to my website, which you mentioned, which is robertwsullivan.com, you click on a link to buy the book. There's links there to buy it from my publisher, which is rsplaunchpad.com. It's in Kindle, it's in Nook, it's in all the ebook formats. It's a 700-page book for $9.99. So you can definitely get it in the iBook format or the ebook format, excuse me. Again, Kindle, Nook, all that stuff. There's an oversized paperback also, but it'll cost you a little bit more. And like I said, if you just go to my website, robertwsullivan.com, you can purchase it there. There's a link that says buy the book. If you want to go directly to my publisher, that's rsplaunchpad.com. Just type in a search for Royal Arch of Enoch, and the links will come up. And of course, all the ebook formats, the Kindle, the Nook, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, that's all readily available also.
Awesome.
Yeah, and what the first part of your question was, what am I working on now? Mm-hmm. The Royal Arch of Enoch, the book concludes. The last chapter of the book is where I talk about some of this Masonic and Enochian and esoteric symbology in popular movies. I limited the Royal Arch book to around 5 or 6 movies. It's the final chapter of the book. When I was writing this, there was many more movies that I wanted to talk about, which had esoteric themes going on, Gnostic themes going on, a lot of stuff, some movies dealing with Jungian archetypes, tying into tarot cards, things like that. But it really didn't fit in the Royal Arch of Enoch book So I wrote a second book entitled Cinema Symbolism, A Guide to Esoteric Imagery in Popular Movies. This book is actually being edited with my publisher as we speak, and I'm looking for a probably a March, April release of this book of this year. That'll probably be out in the next couple months, I suspect. Generally, my experience is it might go a little longer than that, but I'm targeting a March, April release date of that. And right now, I'm actually writing this book is titled Cinema Symbolism. I'm actually writing its sequel, which is titled Cinema Symbolism 2. That's probably a year away. And I get into even some different movies, that I kind of left out of Cinema Symbolism that, the book would have just gone on forever. So I'm dealing with some new movies now. And I'm also writing my first work of fiction, but I'm kind of keeping that one to myself. But Cinema Symbolism, that should be out in the next couple months.
Awesome, incredible work, and I'm really grateful that you're putting this information out there. And I don't have to tell you that there's a lot of superstition when it comes down to Masons in general. So I'd like to clarify a lot of the information as best we can, so that people have a little more positive input opposed to kind of the superstitious stuff that floats around. But there seems to be a very deep esoteric teaching in Mason studies in whatever division they're in. And can you talk about your book and how astrology ties into the Freemasons? And can you speak about the characters in the Bible and how they associate with celestial bodies and perhaps we're not real people?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. What you're talking about now is concepts. It's one of the more controversial components of the book. I don't mind talking about it. I have a whole chapter about it. I'll start with the Bible and I'll go to the Masonic symbolism with the astrology and things like that. Of course, I talk about in the book that in my research at any rate, that the stories of the Bible, both Old and New Testament, are what you call astrotheology. They're not necessarily relating to real people. They're relating to these, this astronomical cycle called the precession of the equinoxes, where you have the sun in one particular house for 2,000 years, and of course we are now ending the age of Pisces, heading into Aquarius. Prior to that, we were in the age of Aries, the Ram. And of course, during these ages, the worship of the sun, the religious traditions seem to reflect the sun being in this one particular house. And of course, you'll see this in Judaism, which of course you have Moses, who is of course the Aryan age lawgiver. The 12 tribes of Israel would be the 12 houses of the zodiac that assist, the lawgiver and reflect this. Moses comes down from the mountain and grows the ram's horns of Aries the rams, and then smashes the golden calf. Of course, the golden calf is the old age of Taurus, which Moses is trying to end. He's upset that the Israelis are still worshiping the symbol of the old age, which is the age of Taurus. And of course, the golden calf is the sun in the house of Taurus. This is the Egyptian Apis bull. And of course, now you have, Moses with the ram's horns. This is, you'll find, Aries is a fire symbol or a fire sign. You'll find fire iconography all over Judaism. Moses, speaks to deity through a burning bush. Pillars of fire, lead the Israelis out of Egypt. And then, of course, you get into Christianity and, Jesus. Again, here we go again, where Jesus is the Son, a.k.a. the Son of God. If you spell the word Son with a U instead of an O, you're on the right track here. And of course, we talked about the 12 tribes of Israel. Of course, Jesus is assisted with the 12 apostles, who are the 12 houses of the zodiac, who assist the sun on its annual journey. You will find other astrological themes in Christianity, where we talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 houses of the zodiac being 12 apostles. Of course, there are other astrotheological zodiac references. For example, the Virgin Mary is the constellation Virgo. John the Baptist is Aquarius, the water bearer. And of course, Christianity would be Pisces, the house of Pisces. So of course, you have Pis and, or Piscean fish and water symbology surrounding Jesus, who, walks on the water and feeds the people with the two fishes, and washes people's feet because, Pisces rules the feet. So you get into this whole concept of the Bible just being one gigantic astrological manual. This is this is paralleled in Blue Lodge Freemasonry and carried forward into the higher degrees, and it comes into the Royal Arch ceremonial also, but it's really reflected in the third degree ritual in Blue Lodge Masonry, which is the Master Mason ritual. And I'll just explain real quick that when I say Blue Lodge Freemasonry, this is the introduction. In order to become a Master Mason, to hold yourself out as a Freemason, you have to go to what's called the Blue Lodge. This is degrees 1, 2, and 3. These are the entered apprentice degree, fellowcraft degree, and the third degree, which is called Master Mason. And this degree contains numerous elements of what I was just talking about, both astrological, and it ties into the Egyptian symbology and astrology with characters like Isis and Orion and Horus, where what you have going on in this degree is the candidate is portraying Hiram-Abiff, who is the architect building King Solomon's temple, and Hiram-Abiff possesses this secret word, this mystical word. It's the secret name of God called the Tetragrammaton, which is the proper way to say it. It's also known as the lost word of a Master Mason, and the reason it's lost is because as the temple is nearing completion, and this is in the ritual, 3 fellow crafts approach Hiram-Abiff and threaten to kill him if he doesn't reveal the word. And in a nutshell, he refuses to give this word up, and the 3 fellow crafts murder him and bury him west of the temple, and his grave is concealed with something called a sprig of acacia. Well, right now we're dealing already with astrological themes. West of the temple is the setting sun, representing the dying sun, and of course the sprig of acacia is a symbol of the sun god Apollo. When Hiram goes missing, King Solomon calls a meeting. He says, okay, where is Hiram-Abiff? No one knows. So he dispatches 12 fellowcraft to go look for him. And of course, the 12 fellowcraft are the 12 houses of the zodiac, symbolizing these 12 houses, who are in a nutshell looking for their lost solar ruler. They find the sprig. They resurrect Hiram-Abiff. They bring him back to life, and of course, this is the resurrected sun. This is ties into Gnosticism with the reawakening of the divine spark. You were dead, yet now you're born again or resurrected. And of course, in Christianity, Jesus, being the Son, is of course dead yet resurrected. And Hiram-Abiff is resurrected on the 3rd try. They try resurrecting him first with the grip of the grip of an entered apprentice. That fails. Fellowcraft, that fails. They resurrect him on the 3rd try with the grip of a Master Mason, which is also known as the strong grip of the lion's paw. And of course, the lion's paw is an astrological reference to the constellation Leo, and Leo is the soul house of the sun. When he's pulled up, the candidate is met by another Mason who forms something called the 5 points of fellowship. And when he does that, he whispers into the candidate's ear what is called the substitute word of a Master Mason. Of course, the real word is lost when he died. And when this is whispered into his ear, it's formed. You have to form what's called the 5 points of fellowship. Of course, these 5 points form what's called a pentagram. If you read Albert Pike, who is a real big, Masonic ritualist and symbolist, Pike will tell you that the 5 points, of course, form the pentagram, and this is, of course, the blazing star of Freemasonry, which he identifies as, and he correctly identifies as Sirius. And, of course, the Egyptian dog star in the Egyptian mysteries was the Virgin Mother Isis. And the nexus that's trying to be formed here is that Isis possessed this secret name of the Egyptian sun god Amun-Re, and it was through possession of this secret word that she was able to resurrect Osiris, her slain brother husband and sire, his solar heir named Horus. And of course, what I've just talked about, what I've just described is the Osirian cycle, where Hiram-Abiff symbolizes the sun, who is Osiris. Osiris is murdered and resurrected. Well, Hiram-Abiff is murdered and resurrected. Isis has the secret name and is able to resurrect him. Of course, the parallel is the candidate forms the 5 points, the pentagram, Sirius, Isis, and has this substitute word whispered in his ear. Thus, he's resurrected in the vein of Horus, of Osiris. And it's essentially the Osirian cycle, the Egyptian astrological Osirian cycle, just being retold under new guises. And what the Royal Arch of Enoch book talks about, and it's really chapter 3 that I get into this, where I tie this in with, the astrological symbolism within Christianity, which I talked about, and even Judaism. And again, when you're talking like the Aryan Age fire symbology, of course, Judaism isn't the only religion. We have Zoroastrianism, which had fire temples. And again, this has to do with, Aries being a fire sign. Of course, Mithraism, of course, the fresco of Mithras slaying the bull. The bull is, of course, the old house of Taurus, the bull. This is paralleled in Judaism, where Moses is Aries the ram, smashes the golden calf, or Taurus the bull. And of course, now we have Christianity, which is now waning. The age of Pisces is going out. And of course, Christianity would be the sun in the house of Pisces, where it's been for the last 2,000 years. And I get into much more of the astrological symbolism, and the different holy dates in Christianity. Why December 25th is the birth of the sun. Why the resurrected sun isn't celebrated to the vernal equinox, which is Easter or Passover. This is all well documented in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. This is paralleled in the third degree Masonic ritual, and you will see the solar astral symbols carried on in the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, and a lot of this is coming straight out of the Book of Enoch, which again was lost to history at the time, yet its elements and its philosophies and some of its symbology are being incorporated into this higher degree Masonic ritual.
Wow, that's incredible. This is just blowing me away. I love listening to what you have to communicate tonight. I have a Wiccan background too, and we work with the pentagram, obviously, and so it's interesting. Also with the Eastern stars. Now, my grandmother was an Eastern star. Now, that's. Can you explain them a little bit?
Yeah, the pentagram, of course, and I've mentioned this on other shows, and I'll mention it for you, for the listeners out there also, is we always have to beware. I mean, I'm not saying this negatively or anything, but the pentagram can mean different things to different groups, of course. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've had people say, "Oh, well, that pentagram in Masonry, that's the Anton LaVey, Church of Satan," and it isn't, of course. And of course, you get the pentagram also can reflect the planet Venus, which has a pentagonal, orbit around the sun. But the Eastern Star also uses the pentagram, and if the Eastern Star is a female Masonic organization, it actually allows both men and women, but it's primarily known for being a female organization. It's created in the 19th century, in the mid-19th century, by a Freemason named Dr. Rob Morris, and he creates it. And of course, the symbol for the Eastern Star is, of course, the pentagram. And of course, the Eastern Star itself is, again, this Eastern, is the Eastern Star Sirius. And if you're wondering, this tie into the Eastern Star with Christianity, you get into some really deep esoteric symbology. I talk about it in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. But what you have going on here, and this ties into the Egyptian mysteries, is the Eastern Star is Sirius, and of course, in the Egyptian stellar pantheon, this is the Virgin Mother of the Sun, Isis. And of course, Isis, also has, ties into lunar symbology also, but she's also the Egyptian dog star Sirius. Of course, her brother husband is Osiris, and in the stellar pantheon, Osiris is the constellation Orion. And Osiris also has some solar iconography that surrounds him as well. When you talk about Egyptian sun gods, you have to kind of sometimes be careful because there's different ones and it can mean different things at different times. But this whole thing about the Eastern Star, and this is just, with Christmas, what we just went through, where you have this concept of on Christmas Eve, three kings following the Eastern Star to locate the birth of the sun, or the Son of God on December 25th. This is completely astrological. The Eastern Star, and this still happens, if you've had the eye, it's a little off nowadays because of the precessional cycle, but 2,000, 2,500 years ago it would work perfectly, where if you take on Christmas Eve, if you see Sirius, it will align perfectly with the three stars in the belt of Orion. These are the three kings. The three stars in Orion are, of course, called the three kings, and they align on the eve of Christmas, or December 25th. And if you draw a line through from the northern hemisphere through the three kings, they align perfectly with Sirius, they will point to the birth of the sun, or the sunrise, on the 25th. So in Christianity, you have this concept of three kings following the Eastern Star to locate the birth of the sun. It's the three kings of Orion that align with Sirius that point towards the sunrise on the 25th, which is, of course, the birth of the new sun, the new annual sun. And if you're wondering where that comes from, this is on the winter solstice of the December 21st, where the sun reaches its lowest demarcation in the northern hemisphere, and for 3 days the sun stands still. The word solstice literally means, standing still, and it doesn't move 1 degree north until December 25th. Thus, the sun is born again, or born on December 25th. We celebrate its birthday on the 25th. We don't celebrate its resurrection from the 3-month Alta winter until the vernal equinox. This is, of course, known as Easter or Passover in Judaic Christianity. And you will see the sun standing still for the 3 days. This is where in Christianity you get the concept of the sun being dead for 3 days before being resurrected or born again. Of course, Jesus is in the tomb for 3 days before coming out on the third day. And of course, this is again paralleled in Freemasonry in the Blue Lodge, where the candidate is resurrected on the third try. This is again another solar reference. And of course, the Eastern Star is, the Virgin Mother Isis, and of course, how apropos to name the female Masonic organization after her. And of course, as we know from reading Albert Pike, who is a big-time Masonic ritualist, he doesn't found the Scottish Rite, but he's very well known within it for reworking some of the Masonic rituals in the 19th century. Of course, if you read his book Morals and Dogma of the Scottish Rite, he'll tell you that the blazing star of Freemasonry, this pentagram, is of course the Egyptian dog star Sirius, and of course this is Isis, who possessed the secret word, which is parallel of the lost word of a master Mason, as it were.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible information. And, these days it appears there are many people who I believe are just not informed pertaining to the Masons in general. There's a lot of superstition that this organization is somewhat insidious. And I'm sure you've heard it. Yeah, and I come from a long line of high-ranking Scottish Rite Masons on my mother's side, by the way, so I totally resonate with your data. And from what I know about them, they were wonderful people. I mean, really enlightened beings. So why do you think some people are afraid of this group?
Well, there's a couple reasons. One is it's it's not to say it's a secret society. It's kind of a misnomer. If it was truly a secret society, we would never have heard of it. Of course we have heard of it. It does have its secrets. Basically people can join it. It's not like we're mutually, we're excluding people. People can join it. In a sense, you have to be a male and you have to believe in a supreme being. If you're not, if you don't have a massive criminal record or anything, I'm sure we'd love to have you. It's what I found is that, especially in this country where you had a lot of the founders who were Freemasons, it's very influential because it teaches, it has a strong moral code. It basically teaches tolerance, and what you will see happening is a lot. It's not that Freemasonry is controlling people or it's influence. It's not, it's not Freemasonry isn't dictating control or dictating to society. It's people who are members of it are being highly influenced by the moral instruction that it's giving and are using Freemasonry in a positive way to help form society. And you will see this in the founding of the United States all over the place, where Freemasonry, its related symbols, its moral teachings are being used for nation building. As being, nation building devices, and it's not negative, but of course, people see an intelligence behind it, and think, oh, look, this is the Masons up to no good, trying to, symbolically control the world or anything like that, and it's not the case at all. It's the people who are involved in it are very, like, even myself. I mean, I'm involved with it, and I was very impressed with it. I mean, hell, I wrote a 700-page book about it. I was so impressed about it. But it does have this negative, influence. Unfortunately, some of this also stems, and I should point this out. I don't want to make it look like I'm, we got to look at both sides of the coin here, of course. Masonry, of course, had a big influence in the founding of this country, and a lot of this was undone, unfortunately, with the William Morgan affair of the 1820s, where, for lack of a better word, this guy who was a charlatan was threatening to expose a lot of the secrets of Masonry. Now, I'm not saying that to be mean-spirited, and of course what happened to him I'm not condoning, but a lot of Masons ganged up on the guy and they took him over the border into Canada and he was disposed of. And it was revealed that a lot of, when these guys were tried, it was basically a Masonic kangaroo court. The governor of New York at the time, a man by the name of DeWitt Clinton, he had to get involved with it. He was a high-ranking Mason. He was involved with the York Rite, which is one of these higher degree bodies in the United States. He was involved with the Royal Arch heavily. and it left a real bad impression on people, where the general populace, instead of viewing Masonry as this, patriotic nation-building organization, was looked at very conspiratorial, very negatively. It was looked at as a secret cabal, Masons interacting over state lines to sort of dictate to people. Masonry takes a big hit because of it. It survives it, but it takes a big hit because of it. And unfortunately, some of this anti-Masonic sentiment, still exists today. It'll probably be around, I'm sure, long after I'm gone. You can almost trace anti-Masonry, people who didn't like it, all the way back to its inception. Of course, we've had papal bulls against it. It's going to be around, and people will be people, and probably not much you can do about it. I don't believe it's negative at all. I view it as a very positive, impact. I think I'm much better off as a person having joined the Masons than I was before. It certainly has provided me with a lot of light in my life, and like I said, I wouldn't have been able to produce this book but for my membership in the Masons. That's for certain, I can tell you.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you on that 100%. I really appreciate you saying that. And it sounds like they definitely, the Masons in general, are connected to the ancient mystery schools of old, so they kind of reenact those through ceremony. Is that correct, or?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that's a strong point you make. We know, as far as the historical timeline goes, that Masonry doesn't come into existence until 1717 in England. Its foundation date is actually June 24th, 1717. And of course, if you know your astrology or astronomy, of course, we're talking about the summer solstice here, where the sun is at its strongest point in the northern hemisphere. So even its founding is a solar reference. And of course, Masonry, you will definitely see a lot of elements in it relating to the ancient mystery schools. Of course, I talked about the Egyptian already. You will see elements regarding secret signs and tokens within Masonry, passwords, passcripts. A lot of this also comes out of Mithraism, which was a mystery school that stemmed out of Zoroastrianism. You will clearly see a lot of the mysteries of Pythagoras in Freemasonry. Of course, the emblem of a worshipful master, and a worshipful master is a person who runs a Masonic Blue Lodge, is the 47th proposition of Euclid. This is, think back to high school, this is known as the Pythagorean theorem, where a squared plus b squared must equal c squared. That's the emblem of a Masonic worshipful master. So you're dealing with the mysteries of Pythagoras as well. You will find elements of mystical. Although I would say, I've been asked this before, and it's a very good question. Does Freemasonry is basically deism? It doesn't really embrace any one religion. Of course, you will see Judeo-Christian elements involved, but one of the real stronger elements you will also see is Sufism, which is mystical Islam. You will see a lot of that also turning up in Blue Lodge Freemasonry, where you will have sort of this concept of a secret, occult, yet legitimate lost history, concepts of moral instructions through the use of symbols, non-solicitation of members. That's all comes out of the Sufi Islamic mystery schools. And of course, you will also see elements of Rosicrucianism, which is a form of mystical Protestantism, being incorporated. And we talk about Masonry coming together in 1717. That's when it really officially recognizes itself on the history books. But we know in the 16th century, in the 17th century, 1600s, there were Masonic lodges in England. Of course, we get into the concepts of the, Teutonic, medieval Gothic, stoneworking guilds who were allowing, non-architects in for, concepps of, discussing philosophy, things like that. So you'll have elements of, mystical, not only building you as a person, but actually, legitimate, operative Masonry architecture as well. And of course, the third degree ritual and even the Royal Arch ritual revolves around architecture. So, you will get these concepts of mystical architecture, and you'll even see this in, the mystery schools, the alignments of buildings to certain constellations. This is copied all over the place with Washington, D.C. I've got a whole chapter in the Royal Arch of Enoch book about the occult esoteric architecture of the Federal District. But yeah, I agree with you that Masonry, both Blue Lodge and the high degrees, is incorporating a lot of elements of the ancient mystery schools in its rituals, in its philosophic teachings, in its symbols, and even things of even just mysticism, Rosicrucianism, things like that. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
It's beautiful. And so far as DC goes, I mean, yeah, the architecture is incredible. So obviously they were trying to achieve a goal on a more multifaceted, maybe a universal level. Can you explain a little bit insofar as what you think they were trying to achieve by that kind of design?
Sure. What you're dealing with a lot of the times when you're dealing with this is this ties into Freemasonry. This comes into Royal Arch Freemasonry and it also comes out of the Gothic manuscripts of Masonry, where you have, it's a long story, but I'm just going to really try to shorten this down. There's a character in the Royal Arch. In the Royal Arch, he doesn't appear in the ritual per se, but in the Royal Arch underlying philosophy, you have the restoration of this Enochian antediluvian knowledge that this biblical patriarch Enoch inscribed on 2 pillars and preserved in this underground vault to preserve the flood of Noah. And you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute with the Federal District. And one of the people who restores this knowledge, he restores the 7 liberal arts, is this sage, this Hellenistic sage named Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, who correctly pronounces the Tetragrammaton and restores the 7 liberal arts and sciences back to mankind. The mathematical Enochian pillar is restored by Pythagoras, and we talked about his influence in Masonry. Well, anyway, Hermes Trismegistus has this thing that's exclusive to him called the Emerald Tablet, and it's the Emerald Tablet. This comes out of the Corpus Hermeticum, which is this text allegedly written by him. I mean, of course isn't, but it's ascribed to him. And in the Corpus Hermeticum, you have this, Hermetic maxim, which is as above, so below, which is basically meant to mean that if you're building buildings of importance, you have to align them to certain, celestial bodies to sort of symbolically draw down the heavenly influence of these celestial bodies here down on Earth. A lot of people see this as, very conspiratorial. Some people even view it as anti-Christian. It isn't at all. Numerous Christian mystics talked about this in their writings. 2 come to mind. Raymond Lully, who was a Christian mystic, who said that buildings of importance should be these astrological zodiac memory temples. The Dominican friar Giordano Bruno also talked about this, that buildings of importance, should contain these astrological, motifs and alignments. And of course, you will see this all over not all over the place, but you will see this in the Federal District with different cornerstone ceremonies aligning buildings to different star systems. Of course, you will see also, in stone, although it's not necessarily astronomical, it is, but you'll see the Federal Triangle, which is, of course, formed by the White House down to the Washington Monument, up to the up to the Capitol Building, and then, of course, Pennsylvania Avenue. Of course, this is the Pythagorean right triangle being formed, which is, of course, which we talked about, which is an emblem of the Masonic rulership of the Worshipful Master. And, of course, we talk about A squared plus B squared must equal C squared. And, of course, C squared is the hypotenuse. And in the Federal District, the hypotenuse would be Pennsylvania Avenue. Of course, Pennsylvania is the Keystone State, and why is Pennsylvania called the Keystone State? This is Royal Arch Freemasonry. A keystone is what binds the other stones to it, and of course, Pennsylvania, where you have the Declaration of Independence being, signed, the Constitution being signed. This is where the 13 colonies were bound into one. I get into the entire occult symbology of why Pennsylvania is the Keystone State, but of course, getting back to your original question, we talk about astrological alignments. One of the ones my book points out, and it's the only one that I know of that does point it out, is the laying of the cornerstone ceremony of the Supreme Court building, which of course occurred on October 13th. And of course, this is you're laying the stone in the house of Libra, and of course, Libra is the scales of justice, the astrological scales of justice. So therefore, you're drawing down from heaven you're blessing the Supreme Court with the stellar, astrological scales that are in heaven, that are close to God. So you'll see things like that going on in the Federal District. You'll see it in other cities as well. You'll see a lot of this also. I'm talking to you now from Baltimore, Maryland. You will see a lot of the Federal District actually being duplicated in Baltimore, Maryland. And the reason we know this is, and again, my book's one of the few, not the only one that points this out, is the architects who were behind the federal district, not only were they all Masons, they're also the architects who were behind Baltimore. People like Benjamin Henry Latrobe, Robert Mills, even people like Hoban. There's a couple others, their names are escaping me right now, but you will see the Mills, Latrobe influence on D.C. Latrobe was, of course, responsible for the Capitol building, and Mills was responsible for the Washington Monument obelisk. And, of course, in Baltimore, you'll see this where Latrobe was responsible for the Baltimore Basilica, and Mills was responsible for the Baltimore Washington Monument. And I get into the parallels with the symbolic Masonic tie-in with all that. So, yeah, you'll definitely see this going on in the federal district. There's much more to it. And, like I said, the Royal Arch of Enoch documents this in full.
Wow, that's incredible. It almost sounds like you carry on the lineage of our celestial ancestors, or what I'd like to call the celestial ancestors. I appreciate your information so much tonight. I was going to ask you what the eye in the pyramid is symbolic of, to the Masons, and why. That's another one that's really people get superstitious of.
Right. Well, what you're talking about here is it's really you got to look at both the obverse and the reverse of the Great Seal to really understand it. I get into it in the book big time. What you have going on is with the most people know the obverse, which is of course the eagle. The conspiracy people all like the reverse, which is the truncated pyramid with the all-seeing eye. What you're really dealing with is it's Masonic, but it's more of a solar emblem. But I will say this, with the Great Seal, you will definitely see Masonic tie-ins with this. And what I talk about in the book is you will see the number 13 all over the place on the Great Seal. I know the eagle has the 13, the 13 arrows. The shield has the 13 stripes. There are the 13 stars over the Magen David, over the eagle's head. There are the 13 berries on the fig leaf and the 13 leaves on the olive branch, I guess it is. And of course, this number 13, what this is reflecting on an esoteric level. Now, I've heard people say, "Oh, well, this is the 13 colonies." Yeah, exoterically, that's correct. But when you're dealing with symbology, any Masonic symbolist will tell you that when you're dealing with Masonic symbology, there is always an exoteric explanation and an esoteric explanation. Of course, exoterically, we're talking about the 13 colonies. I don't deny that. But esoterically, what this is reflecting is this 13th degree coming out of the higher degrees. And of course, this 13th degree is the Royal Arch Ceremonial. It's the recovery of the Tetragrammaton. It's the recovery of the name of God. So what this is reflecting is this reflection of this sacred name being recovered. And of course, the Royal Arch degree is the 13th in the Scottish Rite, which ends on the 33rd degree. It really ends on the 32nd. The 33rd is honorary. And of course, in the York Rite of Freemasonry, which is another higher degree, body in the United States, it's the Royal Arch Ceremonial is the 7th, but it's originally the 13th, and it remains the 13th in the Scottish Rite. And again, it's this premier degree where this secret name is recovered. And the reason we know that number 13 ties into the Scottish Rite and its original Rite of Perfection is if you count the feathers on the eagle, the one wing has 32 feathers, and the other wing has 33 feathers. So, I mean, we clearly have a Scottish Rite, reference right there. With regarding to the truncated pyramid, again, what we're more dealing with here is a solar emblem, and of course, it doesn't say New World Order or anything like that. The actual translation is, thus begins the New Order of the Ages. And what we're dealing with here is what we were talking about earlier in the show, really at the beginning of the show, with this astrological changeover. And you have to understand, what's an age. What you're dealing with is solar ages. And of course, we talked about Judaism and Zoroastrianism and Mithraism being these Aryan age religions. And then Pisces being, the Christianity religion. And of course, the precessional cycle, the zodiac signs move backwards. So we're now entering Aquarius. This would be the new order for the ages, which of course is, reflecting the, philosophical doctrines of the United States, equality, egalitarianism, basically the concepts of Freemasonry. So that's really, I get more into it in the book, but in a nutshell, that's really what the Great Seal is all about. It's announcing this new solar age, which the United States seems to be heralding as this new equal society, the end of the old ages, and as we enter Aquarius, thus begins the new order of the ages, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in the 32nd degree, you say, and then the 33rd is an honorary degree. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's correct. What you have is in the Scottish Rite system, in order to join the Scottish Rite, what you have to do the Blue Lodge. You have to be a Master Mason. You have to be a 3rd degree Master Mason. And after you become a Master Mason, you can go into any one of these. Either the two premier higher degree bodies in the United States are, of course, the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. They reflect each other. They're different, of course, but they both have the Royal Archdegree ceremonial. Both are ultimately born out of the higher degree system of Freemasonry, which is the original Rite of Perfection. This lodge is set up in New York, in Albany, New York. And the guy who's really behind the York Rite of Freemasonry, it's two of them. The main guy is Thomas Smith Webb, but you also have DeWitt Clinton. And, of course, this lodge is operating right in their backyard. And Webb writes a monitor called the Illustrations of Freemasonry. And in this illustration, if you read it, which I have, you will see the fingerprints of this Rite of Perfection all over the place from start to finish. But anyway, once you become a Master Mason, you can do the Scottish Rite or the York Rite or both. They are not mutually exclusive. You can do both of them, or you can do neither of them. No one forces you into these. I chose the Scottish Rite because that's where all my family members went. But loads of my friends who are Masons, most of them have done both of them. Most are York Rite Masons and Scottish Rite Freemasons. They're not mutually exclusive. The Scottish Rite is degrees 4 through 32. That's really where it ends. Now there is a 33rd degree, but that's purely honorary. What I mean by that is you can't solicit it. I can't ask to become a 33rd degree Mason. I'm a 32nd. The only way I could become a 33rd is I'd have to be invited to join it by the Mother Supreme Council, and it's usually given to people who are philanthropic, very active in the community. Could be a celebrity, could be a politician, things like that. Harry Truman, the former president, was a 33rd degree Scottish Rite. It's purely honorary. You can't solicit it. You have to be asked to join. And most Masons, of course, when they join the Scottish Rite, end at the 32nd, and that's where I sit. And maybe one day, who knows, maybe I'll get invited in, but I'm happy being the 32nd that I am.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And with that comes, I guess, some silence, or you're not allowed to really talk about a lot of things within the, I don't know, are you?
well, no, it's a good question. It's a very fair question. When it comes to Masonry, obviously you take oaths not to talk about it. There have been other Masonic, obviously I'm not the first person, I'm not the first Freemason also, not to write a book about Freemasonry. There have been other Masonic authors, and the big one that comes to mind, he was a 33rd degree Mason named Albert Mackey, and basically a lot of Masons follow his creed. I do too. And what he says is this: he said, listen, if you're writing a book about Freemasonry, you're doing it for historical purposes and for scholarly purposes, and you need to talk about the rituals, you need to talk about the philosophy, you need to talk about its history, you need to talk about its symbols. That's okay. No one will come down on you for that, because he did it, and a lot of other, even Albert Pike does it. A lot of other Masons do it as well. What they're really against is what they don't want you talking about is things like the passwords, the pass grips, the handshakes, things like that, which I don't talk in my book, which I don't put in the book. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of places where I have to mention a password, and so what I do is I write its initials down. And the other thing that they frown upon is they don't want you writing about the stuff to sensationalize it. As long as you're doing it from a historical, scholarly perspective, which I think I have anyway, you won't get in any trouble with it. Of course, the Masons who have read the book, the ones who have gotten back to me, they all seem to love it, so no one really has a problem with it. But, the only thing they really kind of frown upon is they don't want you talking about the passwords, the pass signs, the pass grips, things like that, which I don't talk about in the book. However, I will tell you, in the internet age we live in, if you want to find all this out, it's a Google search away. Anyone who, I'm not sitting in front of a computer right now, but anyone who has access to the internet and Google, if you go and type, Masonic handshakes, I'm sure you're going to get 100 websites that they come up on. I don't talk about it just because I don't feel obliged to, and I wouldn't do it anyway. Like I said in the book, if I have to mention a password, I just write its initials down. But again, if a person really wants to find this out, it's a click away on the internet.
Awesome. Yeah, we're getting ready to head for a break here in the next few minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and generate one more question, and we'll see if we can get it in or not. But these initiations and levels of Masons, are they based on consciousness? I mean, when they do their initiations and one spiritual evolution, how do they format that?
I think that's sort of well, it's a difficult. It's a fair question. The way I'm going to answer it is it kind of is up to it's really an individual thing. It would have to depend on the individual Mason. What the rituals are trying to do, it's different for every Mason. What the rituals are trying to do is sort of what you would call a Gnostic theme of awakening the divine spark.
Okay. And Rob, we're heading for a break real quick.
Yeah.
And so we'll be right back. Everybody, stay tuned. Ravenstar's Witching Hour. Rob Sullivan.